Can you tell us what happened in really basic terms, and then the things that companies need to think about?
So you're right, the new regulations were actually adopted in August of 2016, but they did not become effective until August of 2018. The impetus for getting those regulations out in the public and workshopping them and going through the process of adopting them actually came from Governor Brown. Because even Governor Brown recognized and stated publicly that he understood that Prop 65 was being used for unintended purposes to effectively shake down companies. And he sought to reform it, and even Governor Brown, with his environmental credentials, could not get it reformed. There was concern about the warnings not providing enough information to consumers because at its base, Prop 65 is a consumer right to know statute. It has other aspects such as no discharge of chemicals to drinking water. We're not talking about that today. We can talk about that in at another session. But the regulations adopted a new scheme that said if you follow these requirements for providing the warning and you put up a yellow triangle with a black exclamation point in it, and you put up the word warning in all caps in bold, and even the semicolon or the colon has to be in bold, and then you use the magic language, then your warning is deemed to be clear and reasonable, which are the watchwords in the statute. That a warning has to be clear and reasonable to a consumer prior to exposure. So if you use the magic wording, then you're automatically deemed to be in compliance. So that's why it's called a safe harbor warning statute.
Right, and companies are like, tell me what I need to do, because that's been a lot of the complaint about this legislation is like nobody knows exactly what they need to do, when am I done, and so they were trying to say, here's what you need to do. So that's a positive.
Yeah, it is a positive, except that there are several aspects to it. You can use a short form warning, or you can use a long form warning. If you use the long form warning, you have to identify the chemical of concern, and you have to identify whether it's a carcinogen or a reproductive toxin. And you have to cover both endpoints, cancer or reproductive harm in your warning, or else you're only covered for one, not the other. So if there's another chemical that causes cancer, but you've only warned for reproductive harm, you're still potentially liable. So in order to figure out what warning to utilize, you've got to know what chemicals are in your product. And you've got to understand whether the chemicals are on the list and whether they cause cancer or whether they cause reproductive harm. And then you can match the warning to that product so that you cover both endpoints, cancer and reproductive harm, if a chemical that causes each of those harms is in your product.
So how it's a year since they became effective, what are you seeing as the fallout? Or
last year was a very busy year in Prop 65 because these new warning regulations were going into effect and everybody wanted to know what to do. As I said earlier, this is a safe harbor warning provision. You don't have to use it. And the state agency has made it really clear, you don't have to use this, but if you don't, you may have to defend the warning you've used in court. So our advice is use the safe harbor warning, use it appropriately. But it also not only includes potentially putting a warning on your product, and this is where it starts to get convoluted, is if you've got a catalog or if your product is sold on the internet, you also need to have warnings on the internet or in the catalog. We've dealt with a number of clients who sell products on the East Coast, but the product ends up in California. They don't know how it got there. They didn't sell it to California, but it's their product and their name is on it. So when the bounty hunter, plaintiff's attorney, or his staff goes out and finds the product, they see that company's name. That's the company that gets issued the notice of violation, even though they may not have had anything to do with putting the product into California.
Okay, and then one last question, comply up front. That begs the question, does that mean that I should take that list of chemicals if I have a product that might possibly get into California and send it to a lab and have my own data before I ever send it in, so that if I do get one of these notices, I can hit that quickly?
Yes and no. As I said earlier, there are 900 chemicals on the list. you can't test for every single chemical. But through our experience, we know the 5 or 6 chemicals that are routinely the subject of a Prop 65 notice. And so we would counsel clients to focus on those chemicals first. We also can advise clients to talk to their manufacturer. Oftentimes it's a foreign manufacturer. A lot of times it's in China or Thailand or India. But to talk to their manufacturers first and say, look, we can only accept products that meet these standards. And if you send us a product that doesn't meet these standards, we're going to hold you accountable. So sometimes we utilize that mechanism as well.